Chris Bray, welcome. It's such a privilege to have you here on the Collective Institute of Ideas.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Expert backgammon player. You've been writing for The Independent as their backgammon correspondent for 23 years. Author of books, and you play professionally.
Yeah, so 1 point of clarity. So I was the backgammon correspondent for The Independent for 23 years, but 7 years ago the paper went digital and they decided as part of that exercise to delete the whole of the games columns. So I had a column but no home. I'd been badgering the Times for years to have a backgammon column, and coincidentally around that time, or just after the Independent went digital, they sacked their chess correspondent for plagiarism and decided to expand the games that they covered. So they finally acceded to my request to have a backgammon column. There's also now a poker column and a Scrabble column and a few other things. So the Times has by far the best coverage for games in the UK, and I've been doing that for 6 years.
Amazing. And what do you normally write about? Is your brief quite wide?
My brief is what I choose it to be. The limitation is 361 words maximum. It will always include a position. Sometimes it will just be analysis, sometimes it will be an anecdote, sometimes it will be tournaments. We've got the World Championship coming up in 3 weeks' time in Monte Carlo, so there'll be a host of positions and stories from there. I have a cast of imaginary characters who play in what's called a chouette, which is the multiple player version of the game, so that again adds a level of humour. I use Holmes and Watson, so I can do what I like basically within that framework of 361 words. But it's edited 3 times. It's edited firstly by my wife to make sure it's common sense English. She's a good backgammon player in her own right. It's edited by Ray Kershaw, who's one of my colleagues for many years, and then it's edited by the Times to ensure that it fits into the Times brief. Yeah. So by the time it reaches the public, there shouldn't be any mistakes.
Oh, it feels somewhat a privilege to be able to write such a paper, but also definitely for them to have you. People are reading about you online. You're a popular man in the community. What have been the most popular articles you've written about?
It's more about books than about articles, because several of my books are anthologies of my articles. One article is probably not going to change the world, but one good book will do. So I started by doing an album of my independent articles, but then I wrote Backgammon for Dummies at the request of the Dummies guys in the yellow and black livery, and that has sold phenomenally well for many years. Unfortunately, when you write for Dummies, you get a one-off fee. You don't get any royalties, which is a bit of a bummer, but there you go. And then the only thing about Dummies is it has a very prescriptive style, and the editing was very finicky. So I then decided to write the same book with a bit more content in my own prose, and that's called Backgammon to Win. And that is my best-selling book by a country mile, basically. Yeah.
So well selling, in fact, we've got one here.
There you go.
So I recommend all viewers. So Backgammon to Win by Chris Bray.
Yeah.
For those of you listening.
Available on Amazon, obviously.
And it's quite varied, really clearly broken up. You start with a short history of backgammon, the basic rules of play, the opening roll, responses to the opening roll, advanced doubling. People sometimes can dismiss backgammon as being, it's just luck. What do you say to that?
So there's a fairly clear answer. Nearly all games have an element of luck. So any card game, any dice game has an element of luck. And that's part of the fun of it, because in backgammon and several other games, a novice can beat a world champion in one game, but if he played him for 5 hours, he'd lose a great deal of money. In bridge and in poker, the fall of the cards influences your outcome for one evening. Basically, luck evens out. So over the long term, the better player will win. Backgammon is a combination of skill, luck, mathematics and psychology. No one knows what percentage of all of those things is the stronger. In a short match, as I said, a novice can beat a world champion, but in the longer matches where the World Championship and major tournaments is held, it's very unlikely that a novice will beat a really strong player. So it's a nice balance. You get the fun of occasionally beating someone who's incredibly good, and you can boast about it for months on end. But you've got to be very careful and don't play for a lot of money against people who are very good, because you'll end up being very poor.
Yeah, the doubling die has got a very aggressive nature, somewhat.
So doubling. So if you go back in history, backgammon is the oldest board game in the world. It's 5,000 years old approximately, but it wasn't called backgammon. Its origins are very obscure. The earliest ones, or the earliest vision of a board, is from Mesopotamia in 2500 BC, roughly. But obviously nobody wrote anything down, nobody knew the rules or anything else. The game remained largely unchanged for thousands of years, but importantly, in the old days, or up until roughly the death of Shakespeare, there were 3 dice in play, not 2. But when you rolled a double, i.e. the same number on both dice, in the old days you only got to move 2 numbers. So if you roll double 4, you got a 4 and a 4. In the modern game, if you roll a 4 and a 4, you get 4 fours. Right? So they compensated for removing the 3rd dice by adding in the fact that you get 4 goes when you roll a double. Without that invention, the game would have died, because it was already quite slow and quiet, and by the mid-1920s and the time of the Great Gatsby, people wanted more excitement. And so some bright spark, and no one knows who, introduced the doubling cube, whereby you could double the stakes during a game, and that did 2 things. It eliminated some of the luck, and I'll explain why if you want me to do that, but it also meant you could gamble on it. So it was originally introduced as a gambling element, and whoever invented it didn't realise what they'd invented, because the doubling cube is the most difficult part of backgammon by a country mile. If you go to the Middle East, you'll play backgammon without a doubling cube, because gambling is not allowed. But my quick synopsis is, if you play backgammon without a doubling cube, it's like going to La Gavroche for dinner and ordering a green salad, which is absolutely pointless. The doubling cube is incredibly complex, and even now people struggle to come to terms with how complex it is. It might seem on the outside to be a trivially easy game, but believe me, it is not. But that doesn't mean you have to be a really good player to play. Hundreds, thousands, millions of people play backgammon, many of whom will never understand the subtleties of the game in the same way that lots of people play chess without ever knowing or understanding the deep complexities that chess holds. So you can play a game on many different levels. You can play it for fun, you can play it for money, you can play it for love, you can play it for anything. Yeah, it's up to you. But it is an incredibly complex game at its highest levels.
And the doubling die, I won't explain it now, but it really does make the game fun, because the game, backgammon in its very nature, things can really look like you're going to be winning, and then suddenly things can change very quickly. And what's the general mistake people make with a doubling die? Do they tend to double too late or too early? Because there's that psychological element that you touched on there.
Yeah, you get a mix of all of those, and this is down to human nature. There were people that will always double early because they're aggressive and they love it, and there are people who will never take a double because they're meek. Yeah, so your personal character affects very much how you play. And again, if you go back to before the 1920s, or you go to the Middle East, a 1-game backgammon can take a long time. But with the doubling cube in play, the shortest game of backgammon is 2 moves.
And occasionally I hear of there being different variations of backgammon. What are 2 fun variations that you know of that are good to try?
Backgammon is played in 3 ways. You either play head-to-head with another person, and you just keep a tally of who wins as you go along. Secondly, there is match play, and particularly since COVID, the vast majority of backgammon in the world is played in match play, because it's far more challenging. So that is the first to a certain number of points, and then the match score changes how you play moves, it changes how you use the doubling cube. The fun way to play it is in a chouette. If you haven't come across it, is the French for screech owl. and it is a bird that is set upon by all other birds. And it originally came from the game of piquet. In the Chouette version of the game, one player plays against many. So in a 4-person Chouette, one player plays alone, and he is called the box, and the other 3 players are in the team, and the team has a captain. Right? The team can consult on their moves, the box cannot, and also there is a doubling cube in play for each person. The box can double all of everybody, or not, as the case may be, and the team members can double whenever they want to, and they don't all have to double together. It leads to huge fluctuations and variations in the value of the games being played, and if you're in the box, you can lose a huge amount of money in 20 minutes.
Christ, that sounds beyond complicated. And going back to Monte Carlo, have you been to the World Championship? How does that whole world work? Because more than 99% of people have no clue on how the pay is structured. Do full-time professional backgammon players exist? Tell us about that.
So there are major tournaments all over the world. There's an American circuit, there's a Japanese circuit, all that's slightly dimmed because they've changed some of the laws there. There's a European circuit. So every weekend of the year you can play in a major tournament. Yeah? There is a rating system, and there are grandmasters and masters and so on. But it doesn't really matter. The World Championship is only the World Championship because in 1969 someone ran a tournament and they called it the World Championship. Right? There was no it started off in the Las Vegas, then it moved to the Bahamas for 3 years, and it's been resident in Monte Carlo since 1979. It is not, by a long stretch, the most highly rated tournament in the world. Yeah? And all you have to do to play in the World Championship is to pay your entry fee. Yeah? And you can play. And obviously, you could be throwing away your money if you're a novice, but there are a good 10 to 15% of people who turn up in Monte Carlo every year have got no chance of winning. They're there for the ludicrous off chance that they might one day win the World Championship, and the kudos that carries with it. Yeah.
And what do you win if you win it?
Probably about €70,000 roughly. Yeah. But full money tournaments, be it poker, backgammon, or anything else, there'll be a whole load of hedging along the way. So by the time you win, you won't win the full amount because you'll have done deals along the way. Yeah.
And how does the hedging work?
Basically, you get to, let's say you're playing a match to 17 points and the score is 16 all, and the winner is going to win and obviously the loser is going to lose, but the loser will want some prize money. He doesn't want to lose all of it, so they agree as something like a 60-40 split on the total prize pot. You know? And a lot of hedging is done. There used to be a bookmaker at Monte Carlo, maybe there or not this year, where you could wager on the individual players.
Wow. The fascinating world of betting. We should definitely
to
do
me,
an episode on that.
Yeah, I don't enjoy going to Monte Carlo. I stopped going years ago. To hold a major tournament in one of the most expensive places in the world in high season has always seemed somewhat ridiculous to me. So there are better value tournaments, believe me, than the World Championship. And this year they've gone back to a format that I really disagree with.
Interesting. Yeah. Some politics of backgammon.
Yeah. It's very hard, let me point out, to make a living at backgammon by playing. Yeah, unless you're in the top 3 or 4 in the world and you're getting paid appearance money and you're doing lectures and stuff like that. To earn your living just solely playing backgammon is fraught with danger and complexity, and there may be 2 or 3 people in the world who do it, but otherwise my recommendation was you should always have a day job and treat backgammon as an exercise, and that's what I did for years. And then I retired obviously from my day job, and I am now a backgammon professional, but I earn my money through teaching and writing and not through playing.
Yeah, teaching now available through the collective community, which the link will be below. Really excited. I've never had a lesson before, but looking forward to booking one. And because chess is obviously an enormous popular sport, what's the character involved in the chess world? Magnus, is it Magnus Carlsen?
Magnus Carlsen, yeah. I played serious level chess, I played serious level bridge as well. But in chess, barring a complete calamity, the better player will always win. Right? Because the luck element in chess is tiny. Right? It depends on the draw for the colours in the first instance. And it is a pure mind game. Yeah. And it's also, chess and backgammon are games of total information, meaning you can see everything on the board in front of you, you can see the dice. If you play poker or you play bridge, those are games of hidden information, which require a different type of mindset because you're engaged in deductive thinking. So the skills needed to play the different games are similar but varied. Yeah. So I played chess, I played county level chess, but I was never going to be any better than I was because I just don't have the right type of mind and I don't have the inclination to do hours and hours of study, which you are required to do at chess. Yeah. So I discovered backgammon and that played to all of my strengths and that's where I ended up. Yeah.
How would you segment the skills of backgammon? You talked a bit about the maths and the psychology.
So backgammon is largely a game of two things and one additional. So largely it's a game of pattern recognition. So if you see a position in front of you, you will have in your mind positions that you have studied and games that you have played, and you can recall those positions, adjust for the position in front of you, and then make a decision. What that means is you don't get any child prodigies at backgammon because you need a library of positions in your brain before you're able to make effective decisions. Yeah? Secondly, it's a game of arithmetic. There's a huge amount of counting in backgammon, and if you're not very good at mental arithmetic, it's fine most of the time and you can still enjoy the game, but if you want to be a world-class player, you have to be pretty good at mental arithmetic. And
counting.
Thirdly, there's an element of psychology because you're talking about a game where effectively betting is part of it, not directly when you're playing a match, but certainly if you're playing for money, there's a lot of psychology in backgammon because people have a fear of losing, yeah? And they also have a fear of winning. Yeah.
Can you think of really good players who, on the psychology side, have demonstrated unusual approaches or clever things that they've done?
It's not an unusual approach, it's the ability to apply pressure. Backgammon is a game of risk and reward, and every move and every decision has some risk and some reward. And you can, certainly with the doubling cube, and particularly when the doubling cube gets high, you can bluff. Yeah? There's a guy called Nat Ballard in the United States who famously said, in matches I will often redouble my opponent, which means the cube goes from 2 to 4, in the hope that he will pass, because once the cube gets to 4, then basically you're feeling the pressure immediately. And if you read your opponent correctly, people like Nat are very good at reading their opponents and knowing whether they will take or drop, irrespective of whether it is technically a take or a drop. Yeah?
In ancient Persia, backgammon was known as Nod. I'm sure the pronunciations. It was believed to represent life's unpredictability, and the dice symbolises fate. And the checkers represent the struggle to move through life despite chance. You can't help but acknowledge that parts of life do feel similar to backgammon. Do you feel that's true?
There are many people who've invented many different interpretations of backgammon. There's an astrological explanation for backgammon, comparing the points as day and night and all sorts of things. I'll listen to it, but I'm not going to be influenced by it. If you're trying to find an excuse for something. It used to be called duodecim scriptae tabulae with the Romans, and Nero was a very strong backgammon player, it was called tables for short, and he would play for the equivalent of $10,000 a game in ancient Rome. But of course no one actually wrote down what happened if the opponent won, because I suspect they won't have lived very long.
Can you think of, have you got any particularly unusual memories playing backgammon? Maybe it's this character you played, or someone's thrown a backgammon weekend that's involved some quite nuanced, amusing things.
Oh, we used to have great fun. So back in the old days when Victor Stocks ran Lounge, so Victor ran the Playboy Club for many years, and Victor was a very average player, but he showed me a check one night for I think it was something like $200,000, and that was the tax on his winnings from the preceding year that he was just sending off to the IRS in the US. And people played for ludicrous amounts of money. There are only 3 instances of people having been killed while playing backgammon in arguments. There are 2 at bridge, by the way. And we used to... when I was young, 30, 40 years ago, we used to play in a chouette. We played in a pub in the Gloucester Road. We'd play there till 11 o'clock. We would then jump in our cars, and one of the guys had a half share in a place called the Mediterranean Kebab House in the Earls Court Road. And we would play there till 5 in the morning, and we would then all go home and try to get to work for 8 o'clock the next morning. But I was playing there one night against an old friend in an incredibly complex position where both players held lots of points in their opponent's half of the board. And we'd all had a lot to drink, and Mike stopped me and he said, "Look, Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you, but which way round are we playing?" Yeah, so there are a few people like that. There's a nice story about James Goldsmith. So if you have a great deal of money, you can lose a great deal of money and not worry about it. And I had a friend who was playing Goldsmith, and he was winning easily, and then there was a freak set of dice whereby the game became an absolutely 50-50 proposition, with Goldsmith owning the cube on 128, I think, and they're playing for $500 a point. And my friend said, "Look, this is ridiculous. We're already playing for too much money. Why don't we just call it off? Yeah, because one of us is going to use a great deal of money." And Goldsmith thought about it for a minute, and he said, "Look, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Instead of calling it off, I'm going to redouble you to 256. Right? And he redoubled 256. We went on to win the game, and my friend spent the rest of the year paying off the loss on that one game. So beware of people with an immense amount of money. The racehorse guy, whose name I can't remember, who used to get on with Alex Ferguson, he would play for immense amounts of money. Yeah. And most famously, I think, Paul McGreal was the best backgammon player in the world for many years. He was backgammon world champion in 1978. He was a friend for many years, and fortunately he died about 7 years ago. And he would give lessons. He would fly all over the world to give lessons, and he flew every other weekend from Vegas to Texas to give lessons to 2 Texas oil billionaires, and they would pay him, say, $40,000-$50,000 for the lesson, because that was a meaningful amount of money. And then after the lesson, they would play each other, and then they had to agree what they were playing for. And they said, "Look, it's got to be meaningful, because otherwise you can take any double or drop any double. Let's play for $1 million a point." And that's what they did. They played for $1 million a game. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right. Just beware of people with a great deal of money behind them. That's true in all walks of life, not just backgammon.
The quirks of playing.
So there's one rule for high stakes gambling, right? And that is this: you care not a thing about the money. You care only about winning or losing. And if you can do that, then you can be a high stakes player. And if you can't do that, then you can't be a high stakes player. Yeah? In backgammon, my rule is, if you're playing for $10 a point, you've got to be able to budget for losing 100 points. Yeah? So if you then can't write a cheque, old-fashioned terminology, we'll do a bank transfer, for $1,000 and sleep comfortably, you're already playing for too much money.
Yeah, it's and I'm sure a lot of people, certainly myself, can remember the moments where we just made poor decisions, got carried away, which makes me think about the professionals. You talked a bit about character and how that influences outcomes and your ability to play well. What are some of the character traits that you can think about? For example, when you're doing badly, it can become very stressful. People can get overwhelmed. Cutting out the emotions and being pragmatic is obviously very helpful. What are the things that you think about when I talk about that?
Yeah, it's not only helpful, it's essential. If you can't divorce yourself from the dice, then you have absolutely no chance of winning. If you've been watching Wimbledon for the past week, you'll have noticed Irina Sabalenka has got her emotions in check. So when she played in the French Open and lost to Goff, she did not have her emotions in check, and that cost her the match. In backgammon, if you cannot keep your emotions in check, you will lose. You have to be able to exercise the same set of skills, treat each position as if it was a new position, and go from there. There are two, in terms of a rating system, there are two super grandmasters in the world. Yeah. One is a guy called Dirk Schiemann in Germany, and the other one is Moshi. I can never pronounce his surname. He's just known as Moshi. And those two play consistently at a level better than anybody else in the world. Have you come across performance ratings?
No.
All right. Chess computers have been around a long time. People have been using them for years. They weren't very good. Now, obviously, with DeepMind and Alpha Chess and all that, they can beat anybody in the world. Backgammon computers struggled because they were using tree search technologies, and that didn't work because there were too many possibilities because of the dice. And then in 1991, neural net technology came along. So all you do is you give the computer the rules of the game and tell it to teach itself. It plays itself 500,000 times and it works out the strategy. And overnight, backgammon theory changed. So things that have been viewed as gospel for years were suddenly found to be completely untrue. And the game of backgammon was reinvented in 1994 because of the advent of computers. And the guy who did the first one didn't do it commercially. He just thought backgammon was a great vehicle for developing neural net theories. Yeah. And then commercial versions appeared with strange names. So we had JellyFish, we had GNU, we had Snowie, and now we have XG, Extreme Gammon, which has been the de facto standard since 2009. And has recently been bought by the guy who owns Uber, and it's about to have a huge investment poured into it to make it stronger and better and get all the user interfaces sorted out.
Who involved in Uber is doing that?
Travis, but I can't remember his surname.
Oh, yeah, okay. Because it feels backgammon, chess gets a lot of attention, and Magnus, he is a bold figure, known for rocking up late to games. He's entertaining. Is he the best in the world? I know he's been beaten. I don't know where he's ranked. But backgammon seems to be both something that is incredibly popular at the moment, but certainly doesn't have the apps like chess.com, for example. The usability is incredible. Is there something you recommend for people to gammon?
Yeah. So the de facto standard is Extreme Gammon. Yeah, that is a program which runs on PCs. I run it on a virtual machine on a Mac, which is easy to do. The app equivalent is XG Mobile, but that used to be on both the Apple platform and the Google platform. At the moment it's not on the Google platform, but it will return in due course. And there's also Backgammon NJ. Both of those are okay. XG Mobile is stronger, so it's best if you have an Apple device. Yeah. But to go back to performance ratings, so XG will give you a performance rating. It will tell you how good you are. Right?
Really?
Which nobody ever knew before computers came along. You have two performance ratings, one for your doubling cube handling and one for your checker play handling, and you combine the two to get your overall rating. There isn't a single player in the world who has a better cube handling rating than a checker play rating, because cube handling is that much more difficult. XG, the program, plays with a performance rating of 0. So 0 is perfect and anything above that is imperfect. The Super Grandmaster is 2.75. If you're a really good expert player, you will play just below 4. Yeah? An intermediate will play round about 8 to 10, and a beginner will play anything from 17 to 20, just to give you some idea. Most of the people who win the World Championship are going to be capable of playing around 3.5 to 4. But, what was I going to say? 3.5 to 4. Sorry, lost my thread for a moment. In the old days, nobody recorded a backgammon match, by the way, till 1977. Right? Nobody ever wrote down a match. They wrote down positions, they never recorded a match, which was ridiculous. Sorry, 73, not 77. And then there was a UK versus US match. Everyone recorded the moves. Nowadays, everybody records their moves. Everybody, if you play on an online site, you can download your games and then you can analyse them. So then I never play, after I've played a match online, I never play another one till I've analysed the previous one. So if you put in World Championship matches from the 70s and before, you'll get people with a PR around about 8.5, right? Because no one actually knew they were making so many mistakes. Now, as I say, you'll get a raft of players who can play between 3 and 4, and those are the people who will be able to contest World Championships and major tournaments.
Fascinating how AI impacts our
Yeah.
ability to understand what we know and what we don't know, and how, as
Yeah.
you say, it's changed the game. Going back to the controlling your emotions, are there some tricks you give people or exercises you give people to do that?
It's largely down to your own personalities. I used to get annoyed when I was first starting playing the game where you rail against the dice and stuff like that because they've been unfair to you and you've had a horrendous night and lost a great deal of money. It's all about, who's the guy who coached the England World Cup rugby winning team? It'll come to me in a moment. Clive Woodward, right? So Clive Woodward has a thing called teacup, and that's called thinking correctly under pressure. Yeah? That mechanism can be used in any game, right? And that is what he coached the England World Cup team in 1973 to use, and that's why they won the World Cup. Yeah? That set of approaches can be used by anybody, and I've tried to teach people the fundamentals of that in backgammon. Stan Wawrinka, the tennis player, became a much better player once he got a tattoo on his arm, which basically said, fail, fail again, get better. And that's all it says. That's not exactly what it says, but you get the idea. It doesn't matter if you fail, provided you learn from when you fail. Yeah? And that enabled him to win a couple of slam tournaments. Yeah? So everybody has a different mechanism. And there are some people who cannot control their emotions, and they're great to play against because you win a huge amount of money.
Really interesting. The psychology around failure, a never-ending topic.
People they choke, yeah? Novotny in the Wimbledon final, there's a couple of others, classic examples. The guy who lost the Open Golf Championship when he stuffed his ball in the water and took an 8 at Carnoustie on his final hole. People who collapse under pressure, right? And that happens in backgammon. I've seen World Championships where particularly people have collapsed under pressure, and I do quite a lot of commentary, and you can tell when people are beginning to make mistakes.
And when, let's say you're playing, Chris, and there's an audience, and for about 50 reasons you're really feeling pressure, you really want this game, and you make a mistake, what are you telling yourself to keep calm and be focused?
I don't know, as you get older you get much more sanguine, and if I win or lose a major tournament, it's not going to change my life. I'm much more interested in probably my grandchildren now than I am in winning a huge major tournament. But for some people it's not the same, and they end up succumbing to the pressure. But I always just say it's the dice, basically. It will be what it will be. All you have to do is make the best moves based on the dice and the position in front of you, and that's all you can do. You can't control anything else. Yeah? You can exert pressure on your opponent by, let's say, you're thinking of doubling and you know that the other guy should pass. It's a trivial example, but I may well wait a minute and a half before I double to give the other guy the impression that it's close, which it isn't. So you can use psychology like that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said around knowing what you can control and what you can't control. And in one of Stephen Bartlett's interviews, he interviews an entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur states that they often view businesses as games of chess. It's not life, it's just something you choose to be involved with. If it doesn't work out, then on to the next one, basically. And there clearly is something in that mentality to be able to just see and acknowledge that actually having a go regardless, knowing that things don't work out.
If you relate to that, when I used to work for IBM, I did a huge amount of work with startups and entrepreneurs and stuff. And if you take 20 startups, that one might succeed, 10 will tank, 5 might break even, 4 might be a bit dodgy. And as you said, you just move on to the next one. And if you play in backgammon tournaments and you play 10 a year, 5 of them are going to go south very quickly. But you'll hope to cash in 2 or maybe 3 of the others sufficiently that you're happy with the outcome. But you cannot win every game you play. I had a colleague in my club at home. He's a a world-class bridge player, and he came across to backgammon and played. And he was quite good, but he could never cope with losing at all. So after 2 weeks, he was gone. I had a Formula One driver as a student, and his only reason for taking lessons was to get back some money that he lost from one of the other Formula One drivers. We probably achieved that. As a mental giant, he wasn't there. I just taught him. And again, when you're teaching people, you have to recognise how far you can take any particular individual. Because if they haven't got all the characteristics required, you can get them to a certain point, but you can't take them any further.
That's really interesting, because I think as humans, we're not, and this is likely to change with AI, but we're still not that good at mapping out intelligence skills. And it's certainly obvious, at least to me, that some people are able to memorize so many different scenarios in truly an astonishing way. 1 and 2, talking about the mental arithmetic, just being able to map out. And but as you say, recognizing how different people's brains work.
I was born with the skill to do mental arithmetic very quickly, and I didn't learn it. I did practice it, but I was basically born with that ability. And if you're not born with that ability, I can teach you to count a backgammon. My fundamental belief is that anybody can count, right? They may not want to count, but they can count, right? But you're also under the limitation of a clock in major tournaments, and you may not have time to do that. If you're online, you get given the counts, right? But in live play, you need to be able to perform mental arithmetic very quickly. And if you can't do that, I can only take you to a certain level.
Interesting. Can I put you on the spot? Can I give you some numbers to pull out?
No, you can, but you can give me a try. But my skill, so most people's skills are related to what they do. Right? So if you give a chess player or a backgammon player and you give them a minute to look at a board, they can walk to another board and reproduce it. If you put a set of chess pieces on a chessboard but not in a normal position and ask them to replicate that on another board, they have got no chance of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I know when I play backgammon is I don't think about what the opponent's doing enough. Do you spend much time? That seems to be a very critical, useful way to learn about the game.
So in any position, you should have a game plan, and you should understand your opponent's game plan. You want to execute your opponent's game plan, and disrupt your opponent's game plan. Right? The dice don't always let you do that, but you should always have an idea of what you're trying to achieve before you roll the dice. They may not play ball.
Yeah, I love that you allude to dice having their own world.
There is a dice god. It's called Pipcelot. Pipcelot. Right?
And you met your wife through backgammon, is that correct?
No, I met my wife at university, but she taught me to play backgammon. Right? Years ago, she taught me to play, and I thought it was a stupid game. And then one night, I got involved. I was system testing software, and we had nothing to do. And some guy challenged me to backgammon. I said, "Oh, I can play, no problem. Let's play." And he said, "Let's play for money." And I lost 10 quid, and I wasn't having it. So at that point, I went and bought 2 books. Within 2 weeks, I got all my money back and a lot more. You have to be good at backgammon, you have to study. You have to read. You have to listen to online matches with good commentary. Dirk Sheeman, who I mentioned earlier, has written a book called To Hit or Not to Hit, which in my opinion is the best book on backgammon I've ever read. That only came out last year. There were 2. Paul McGreal wrote the book called Backgammon in 1976. For many years, that was the Bible. Right? Dirk, 3 years ago, wrote The Theory of Backgammon, which is a very heavy-going, virtually mathematical treatise on backgammon. But again, if you're going to be good, you need to have read it.
Yeah, interesting.
You can't. People come to backgammon and think it's easy and you can make some money, and that's not true. Like everything else in life, you get out what you put in. So you have to put effort in. I probably spend, a minimum of 15 hours a week playing. I will do study for 3 or 4 hours a week. I give lessons for 7 hours a week. So I'm constantly involved. And as you get older, of course, it gets more difficult to remember everything. Which is a bit of a bummer, but again, you can't do anything about that.
Chris, it's been such a privilege to hear from you about all corners of backgammon, whether it be learning about the championships to fantastic stories, what makes a good player. We're now going to jump into the quickfire questions.
Go on then.
3 things that give you joy.
So primarily my family. I've just acquired two new granddaughters. Winning, because that's what I like to do, and friends. The backgammon community is fantastic, so I've got friends all over the world from backgammon.
A mantra you want to embrace.
Just to play honestly, I think, and enjoy life, enjoy backgammon, enjoy life. If you don't get enjoyment out of what you're doing, you're not going anywhere, and you'll live a short life.
One unusual thing that gives you pleasure.
Croquet? Doesn't matter, great fun.
Talking of sports that can become competitive.
Yeah. Croquet's a vicious game, believe me. My back doesn't want me to play golf anymore, so I'm switching allegiances into croquet, but it's a fantastic game.
A favourite book, film or artist that isn't obvious?
Oh, that's a shame. My favourite book for years was Lord of the Rings,
Okay.
because I came from that era, and Jimi Hendrix was always my favourite artist, but that's going back in the sands of time again. Yeah. I saw his last but one performance.
Which was where?
Isle of Wight, 1970.
Wow. Advice that you have been given that you are very grateful for?
Tricky. I've been given lots of advice in my life, but probably the easiest thing to say is just don't let things get you down, because there are times in your life when you have great lows. I had a mentor at work once, and he would always look on the bright side of life. To be able to do that consistently is fantastic.
Takes focus that.
I know I'm probably not going to win the World Championship at this point, mainly because I don't play in the tournament. I'm good enough to win it, but I'd rather go to my tournament in the Cotswolds. I'll play in the British Open this year. That'd be fun.
Where would that be?
Strangely, it's held in the exotic location of Leamington Spa.
Okay. That's where you'll be.
I'll be there at the end of August, yes. But I have a favourite tournament, which is in Beaulieu-sur-Mer, which is next to Villefranche on the French south coast. Just a fabulous place to visit. In fact, they cancelled the tournament this year, and we went anyway because we just like the place so much.
And we'll be finishing up the recording now, but is there anything you want?
No, I mean, if to anyone listening, I mean, if you want a quick fire way to learn backgammon, then just buy one of the books, be it mine or anybody else's, because learning by experience, it takes too long. So put in 2 or 3 hours spade work by reading a book. Find someone to teach you with whom you have empathy, and you can go quite a long way. And to me, it's the best game in the world. It gives me endless hours of enjoyment, both from a study point of view, but from a playing point of view. You get new positions every day that you don't understand, and you learn, like many things, you learn every time you play.
Amazing. Thank you so much for today.